over $127 million gets spent on meat pies annually. But these harmless-looking pies can quietly undermine your health over time. Today, we're exposing 8 meat pie brands sold in Australia to avoid right now. And after that, we'll show you what to eat instead. Number 8. This is the pack that wins because it's cheap, plain, and it's always there. But the lab-style reality is right in the numbers. A Fairfax Commission test of supermarket pies found Woolworths' home brand sitting at about 27.6% meat. That clears the legal line, but it also tells you the whole strategy. If the standard is 25% and you're floating just above it, you're not paying for a meat pie, you're paying for a product designed to meet a definition at the lowest cost. And that definition matters more than people realise, because meat flesh isn't a clean steak. Under Food Standards guidance, it's skeletal muscle, and it can include attached fat and other tissues like rind, connective tissue, nerves, blood, and blood vessels. So when you're hovering near the minimum, you're buying a filling that can legally contain the cheaper parts of meat while the rest of the bulk comes from water, refined pastry, fat, and salt. That's why people describe budget pies as mostly gravy, with odd gristly bits. It's not you being picky, it's a recipe that needs thickening systems and heavy seasoning to make water behave like richness. The health problem shows up quietly because this is the kind of pie people eat on autopilot, after work, before the footy, when you're too tired to cook. And once a cheap comfort becomes a weekly habit, you've turned a snack into a regular dose of sodium and refined carbs, with very little in it that behaves like a real meal. Number 7. Balfour's sells you tradition, old South Australian bakery energy. So your brain expects simple ingredients, but it comes with thickeners like gums, carrageenan, flavour enhancers and preservatives, and multiple artificial colours like. That's not automatically evil, but it's a signal that the filling is being held together by technology, not by meat. Here's why that matters in real life. When you rely on a stack of thickeners and enhancers, the product can taste the same even if the underlying quality shifts. People report a dry, hard pastry and a filling that feels like gravy mush with barely any meat particles. If you're prone to headaches, skin flares and gut irritation, a long additive list is the fastest way to stack triggers without noticing. Number 6. Coles is the perfect case study in why you can't judge a pie by how good it tastes. Because the red flag here isn't just formulation, it's variability and disputes over what you're actually getting. In one report, lab tests found a Coles You'll Love Coles meat pie sample at 22.7% meat, which would fall below the minimum standard to qualify as a meat pie. Coles disputed that, saying its own test recorded 30.5%. Then another investigation reported Coles Smart Buys sitting higher again, around 32.7% meat. It's that even in mainstream supermarket lines, the consumer can end up in a world where a product's meat content becomes a debate you can't settle at the checkout. And that matters because the lower the meat signal, the more the rest of the filling has to be built with extenders and structure tricks. Your earlier text spells out the mechanism. Water-first fillings thickened with modified starch and stretched with textured soy protein to mimic the bite of meat. That's cheaper and it's technically allowed, but it changes what you're actually feeding yourself. Textured soy protein also matters for a different reason. It's a common allergen issue for some people, and even for people who aren't allergic, soy extenders are often the difference between a pie that's meat-forward and a pie that's bulked out. If you've ever eaten a home brand pie and felt bloated, thirsty, or weirdly unsatisfied, that's the combo. A water-heavy, starch-thickened filling that needs salt and flavour systems to feel like anything. Number 5. New Zealand's Commerce Commission investigated Big Ben meat pies after testing linked to reporting found concerns about meat content claims. Their own testing found Big Ben pies averaging about 24.1% meat content, close to the claimed 25%, but they also flagged concern that one pie tested as low as 21.8%. And once you see a number like 21.8%, it changes how you interpret the whole category. Remember, the legal minimum for a meat pie is 25% meat flesh. If you're drifting under that, you're not talking about premium versus budget. You're talking about basic identity. Now zoom out and ask what fills the gap. If the meat is thin, the calories are coming from pastry, thickened gravy, and fat. That's why these pies can feel heavy and still leave you hungry again later. It's also why the sodium problem shows up fast. A single meat pie can contain over 1,000 milligrams of sodium, and Food Standards Australia-New Zealand has highlighted that a meat pie meal with chips can hit around 1,045 milligrams of sodium in one go. That's not a tiny difference. That's a meal that can eat up a huge chunk of your daily limit before you've even thought about dinner. Number 4. Mrs. Mac's meat pies hurts because it often sits at the higher end of the price range, which makes people assume they're choosing better. But again, the sources proved differently. The packaging stated the meat content of the filling was 31%. Commerce Commission testing found 8 of 10 sampled pies had less than 31% meat, with a range from 24.3% to 34.1%, and an average around 27.26%. That's a huge spread for a product people buy because they want consistency. It's also a reminder that packaging claims can become part of the marketing illusion. And when the average sits closer to 27% than 31%, you're basically back in that barely above minimum world, except you're paying premium prices to live there. The health risk isn't one dramatic moment. It's pattern math. If you're eating a higher priced pie thinking it's more meat, you might actually be buying the same low meat structure as budget pies: water plus thickened gravy plus pastry. That's why research talks about flavour enhancers and caramel colour being used to make the filling taste and look richer than the raw ingredients would allow. Caramel colouring isn't there to improve nutrition. It's there to make a greyish water and starch gravy look like it came from slow-cooked meat. And if a product is tasty enough, you stop questioning how it got there. This is also where price becomes dangerous, because if it's $3.20 a pie and you trust it, you might eat it more often, and then the sodium and fat load becomes your normal. Number 3. Black and Gold is the classic trap brand because it can feel like a win. Your source says choice taste testing had 4 and 20 on top, with a bargain Black and Gold following close behind, which sounds like proof that cheap can still be good. But taste is not the truth. Taste is chemistry. Salt, fat, gravy and colour are very good at making fine happen, even when the meat content is thin. And older testing referenced in your first text reported that some brands, including Black and Gold, failed to meet even the low minimum standard in certain samples. That's the part you can't ignore. When a brand has a history in the conversation of struggling to meet the minimum, it tells you the priority is not how much real meat can we afford to put in this. It's how close can we get to the line without crossing it. Then add the common formulation trick your sources keep coming back to: textured vegetable protein or soy protein to bulk out the filling, plus thickener systems to make water behave like gravy, plus colouring to make it look darker and meatier. If you have soy sensitivity, a budget pie is a terrible way to discover it, because the label doesn't feel soy forward. It feels like a harmless meat pie. And if you're trying to lower ultra-processed additives, this is the opposite direction. The danger with Black and Gold isn't that it's always disgusting. The danger is that it can be just tasty enough to become a habit while still being engineered at the compliance edge. This is how people end up eating meat pies that are functionally pastry and salt deliveries. Number 2. Herbert Adams is the premium costume. It's the box you buy when you want to feel like you're choosing quality, not convenience. And here's where it gets tricky, because your sources show a split personality. In one choice lab analysis, a Herbert Adams chunky style pie barely made the minimum requirement, sitting just over 25%. That means the brand has had lines that look premium while still being formulated to the legal floor. But in another choice report, a Herbert Adams King Island Gourmet Premium Beef Pie was recorded as the highest meat content in the group at 38.5%. So yes, the brand can do it, and that's exactly why it's a trap. Because the name Herbert Adams doesn't guarantee you're buying the 38.5% line. You might be buying the one that barely clears the minimum, wrapped in gourmet language. This is where consumers get played by labels. The box shows chunky beef. The name says pepper steak or gourmet. Your brain fills in the rest. Then you bite, and it's mostly mince, mostly gravy, and you're paying extra for the story. And the health piece still applies even when meat content is higher. A pie can have more meat and still be heavy in salt and saturated fat because pies are a processed food category. The point isn't never eat Herbert Adams. The point is a premium price does not automatically mean a clean ingredient list, a better meat percentage, or a healthier meal. If you're not checking the meat percentage on the specific box in your hand, you're gambling. Number 1. 4 and 20, classic meat pie is the icon. Footy culture, servo culture, tradie lunch culture. It has nostalgia armour, which is exactly why it's so effective as a product. But the reality is simple. Even when it tests above the minimum, the structure is still the same industrial playbook. Fairfax lab testing reported 4 and 20 around 30.4% meat, which sounds better than 25% until you do the maths. If it's 30% meat, 70% of what you're eating is still pastry, water, gravy, fat, salt, and extenders. That's why their own spokesman pointed out that gravy makes up about 24% of the filling, and the primary ingredient in gravy is water. That's not a conspiracy. That's an admission of how these pies are built. And your earlier text adds another ingredient clue: textured soy protein being used as a meat extender, a cheap way to mimic the bite of meat while keeping costs down. This is why 4 and 20 can taste right and still leave you feeling like you ate mostly sauce. It's engineered to hit the emotional memory of a meat pie, not the nutritional reality of one. Then there's the bigger insult your text highlights: ownership shifts and private equity influence in the parent company story, which matters because cost-cutting loves water and extenders. Again, that doesn't mean foreign equals evil. It means margin-focused ownership tends to reward exactly the shortcuts that turn a national icon into an industrial formula. So if you've ever eaten a 4 and 20 and thought, why do I need so much sauce? Why does it feel like gravy first? Why am I hungry again soon? You're not being dramatic. You're describing the product design. Now, before we talk about what to eat instead, one crucial reality check. The definition of a meat pie changed in 2007 for a reason. Authorities tightened it after concerns that nasties like snouts and ears had been legally allowed to pass as meat. Today, the minimum is 25% meat flesh, and even that can include attached fat and other tissues, which is why 25% meat is not the comfort sentence people think it is. These pies are okay as an occasional meal, but if they're your default, you are letting a minimum standard become your daily nutrition plan. So what should you actually eat instead? Start with Villiers Family Bakery if you can find it. Your text frames them as a South Australian company that leans into real inputs: Australian beef, on-site meat processing, hand-cut vegetables, and a long track record of quality control. That matters because the biggest shortcut in this category is outsourcing the filling to a system that optimizes cost before flavour. Villiers wins the opposite way, by making the pie itself the product, not the packaging. If you want the best version of this food, the fastest hack is local award-winning bakeries. The Great Aussie Pie competition has been running since 1989, and your sauce lists winners across the country. This is where you stop gambling on freezer chemistry and buy a pie made by someone whose entire reputation depends on the bite. Those bakers win on meat content, flavour and pastry quality, not because they can afford the most convincing gourmet box. If you need supermarket convenience, check out Aldi's Elmsbury. Bakehouse Premium grain-fed beef pies are rated a best all-rounder. That's useful because it proves you can sometimes find a decent option inside the mainstream aisle if you choose the right line. And if you want a simple rule that saves you from 80% of the nonsense, do this. Look for pies where meat is one of the first two ingredients, where the meat percentage is clearly higher than the minimum, and where the ingredient list doesn't read like a lab inventory. Tell us in the comments which pie brand you grew up on, and be honest, does it still taste the same? If you value independent consumer research like this, hit like, share this video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. See you in the next one.